Okay, this week we're talking about the story sequence chart, which is a different way of doing the keyword outline. So before, when we did the keyword outline, you basically paraphrased every sentence. And we took 3 words from the original sentence and wrote our own sentence. This time we're going to take a large chunk of text and write a summary in 3 different parts. And those parts are going to follow the story sequence chart. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so here is the story sequence chart. We have the characters and setting at the beginning of the story. Then the conflict builds, or we identify a problem for the main character, which reaches a climax, also known as the point of no return, and then the resolution. So in our story sequence chart, we're going to take each of those sections and write some keywords about it. The same rules, you can have 3 words per line, but symbols and pictures are free. Remember, the picture has to be faster to draw than it is to say. So we are going to look at, and we did this in class, we looked at the tail of the anklet, and that is what we used to fill in our story sequence chart. So that's what we're going to do today. So if we think about what is the character and setting of the anklet, and the character and setting, we have, it is set in Arabia. In class we talked about how the Arabian Nights, the first ones were found in 900 AD. Really, we don't know that the anklet was set in 900 AD, but we do know it was set a very long time ago, and 900 AD is free because it's pictures and symbols. And then we talked about how there are really 2 stories here. The first story is the story of Scheherazade and King Shahryar. But we're going to focus in this video just on the tail of the anklet. So when she starts talking about Delilah. So let's have Delilah up here too. Okay, she's our main character. So what are some other things that we know about Delilah? We're just going to refer to her as D from now on because that is a symbol and doesn't count. And she's the only character that has a D as the initial of their first name. So, Delilah, we know that she is mistreated. She buys a magic vase, which you could draw a picture of a vase really easily, but and she wants love, right? And then we could draw a little heart in there. Okay, another character we have are the stepsisters. And I hope this story sounded familiar to you. It is like an Arabian Cinderella, which we talked about in class. Isn't that interesting? And how is this Cinderella different from the one that we know in Western culture? And what does it say about different values? Anyway, that was a fun discussion. So the stepsisters, they are cruel, selfish. Eventually they are swallowed by the vase. We have a prince. And he wants someone with small feet. Sees her anklet and falls in love because she must have such tiny feet. Some of my students thought he was shallow, so I could put that in there. And then, so we've covered when does the story happen, we've covered the major characters who are in the story, what do they like, where do they live or go. We could say that Delilah goes to the, we can do an arrow. She goes to the palace. And then what happens? Right, and then she we'll say home. Right, after the palace, she runs home. Alright, so kind of covers what happens up until our main climax. So when the next part, when we're looking at conflict and problem and climax, I like to just kind of look ahead and identify what is the climax. So what is the point of no return in this story? And really the point where, you know, nothing changes much after that is when she is changed back from a dove into a woman by the prince. So everything before that is part of the conflict and problem, and then that is the climax, and then the rest is resolution. So she has a problem that she wants to solve, and what is her problem? Okay, so her problem really is that she wants love. So let's do Delilah, and let's do our little heart again. Right? She wants love. And really, she falls in love with the prince. Right? When she sees him, the prince of the wine-colored velvet. But she has this problem, right? Her stepsisters are really mean. She has to run home. Doesn't get to introduce herself to the prince. Let's actually leave anklet up here. Right? Because that's how the prince finds her. She leaves her anklet. Okay, so then the prince we can say he already loves tiny feet, we know that. That wants the anklet. Let's change wants to woman. Okay, so the prince goes looking for the woman of the anklet. And then what happens? Then what happens is her stepsisters, right? He finds her. Prince, well, let's do that. Yeah. Prince finds D. Let's say engaged, right? Then they decide they're getting married. Okay. And then what happens? Stepsisters sabotage dove, right? They turn Delilah into a dove. And then, right, Delilah as the dove flies to the prince. Okay, so we've got our conflict and our problem. What is our climax? Prince pulls the pins. Woman. Okay. Delilah turns back into a woman. Then what happens? The sisters eaten by the vase. And then Delilah puts her sisters on the shelf, right? Puts the vase on the shelf for someone else to deal with. And sometimes there's not a ton of stuff on the climax and resolution section, and that's okay. Especially for some of the stories that we will read, that climax and resolution just comes really quickly. That's okay. What I want you to be able to do is to use these questions to guide your keyword outline, and then you're thinking about how those are related, and that you just have 3 words per line, and then you can take this whole, point 1, the whole character and setting section, and write a paragraph over it. So you would use each of these lines to write a sentence. Okay, same with number 2, same with number 3. So sometimes we'll write about it, and sometimes we won't. But that is the story sequence chart for the anklet.